Okay, tutorial number 2. Today we're going to be creating a timer class. So make sure you got your dodgeball program up. We've still got our void set up and our void draw. And what we're going to do now is create another file. So up here next to our dodgeball tab, got a little arrow, and we're going to click on it and hit new tab. So click on it, hit new tab, comes up with a little window, and we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it timer with a capital T, and we're just going to hit OK. Alright, so we've got a new file open next to our dodgeball. So we've got our 2 tabs, and we're going to create a class. So we're going to go ahead and go class, and we're going to call it timer. That's the name of our class. We're going to open squiggly brackets and close squiggly brackets. So everything inside here is going to be our timer. So we're going to need a variable first. So we're going to create a float and call it time with a capital T. So there we go. We've got our time. It's a float, and we haven't set it anything yet. That's fine. So first up, we're going to create a constructor. A constructor is called the first time you create a class, and it sets up the class. So it's got to be named exactly the same as our class name. So we're going to call it timer, and we're going to open up a circle bracket, and we're going to put in a temporary variable called set. And what that is, that's just a temporary variable that gets put in from when we call this constructor. We put a number in there, so it could be 10. We want to set our timer to 10, so we put it in there for the first time. That only gets used inside the constructor. So our time is our variable that we had at the beginning, and we're going to make it equal to set. What that does is sets our time to whatever our set was when we created our constructor. So this is our constructor, so I'm just going to put a comment here. Constructor, and you create a new timer. So excellent. We've got a constructor, we can create a timer. But now how do we actually get the time? So we're going to create a new type of function here that you might not have seen before. It's a function that returns a value from our class. So it returns a value of whatever we put first. So it's going to return a float, a number. It's going to be called get time. And so it's a function, so we've got get time, open and close circle brackets, we don't need anything inside them, and then we've got an opening and a closing squiggly brackets. And in here we're going to go return. This is a special function in all programming language, and we're going to put our time variable. So this is our variable we have inside our class, and we're going to put it inside that, and that's going to close it off. So when we call this from our timer, so we go our timer's name dot get time, it's going to return a float so we can get the actual time, or what our timer currently is. So this is going to returns the current time. There we go. These are just comments here, just so we remember what our functions do. We don't have to read through the code every single time to figure out which one we need to use. We can just look at our comments. So now we want, say our time is counting down. Once it gets to 0, we want to reset it to like maybe back up to 10. So we're going to go void and set time. And we're going to put in here again one of these temporary variables. I'm going to call it set again. And inside squiggly brackets, we are going to put time, which is our variable at the top here. Here it is. It's going to be equal to set. That function looks very similar to our first function, but we want to have it as a separate function. You don't want to be calling a constructor and recreating the class every time, so we can just call up this function. So this is going to, let's write a comment here, set the timer to whatever you put as your temp variable. There we go. So it could be i.e. 10, 60 seconds, and just remember that is in seconds. Alright, so we're able to get the time, we're able to set the time, and we're able to reset the time. But now what about actually updating the time so it counts up or down? And because we're creating a class, we can get it to do either up or down. We don't want it to do both at the same time. So we're going to have void, let's go count up first. Up. And again, there's a void function. It's a function. We don't need to put anything inside here. We don't need any temporary variable to come in from outside the function. And we're going to get our time, which is our variable, our float at the top, and we're going to make it plus equal. So this is going to add on something. And what we want is the time between each frame. So we're going to do, and for the number of frames we have, so maybe our frame rate 60, in between each of those frames, that's but it's going to have a time, and all that time is going to make up 1 second. So 1 second divided by the number of frames rate, which is our special function in processing. It gives us that how many frames we're running at. That will give us the time in between, and we just add that onto our time variable. So this is our update the timer by counting up. And it's very important, this needs to be called within the void draw in our dodgeball file. So within let's go within void draw to work. Alright, so there's just a comment in there. So now we're going to create the other one, and it's very similar, except instead of plus equaling it, so adding to it, we're going to subtract from it. So we're going to go void again. I'm going to go count down, and same in here, time is going to be minus equal to 1 divided by frame rate. As you can see, the difference there is I've just put a minus symbol here instead of a plus symbol. So it's the exact same thing, so the comment's going to be the same. We are going to do this, but we're going to count down when we call this one. You can't call both of them at the same time, and I'm going to show you why in a minute. So once we've got this set up, we have our class, opening bracket. If we hit Control T, it will just format it nicely. So Control T will format on the keyboard very nicely all our code. So we've got our variable, we've got a constructor, we can get the time, we can set the time, we could count up or we could count down. So let's go ahead and actually see if this works. So back in our first file, we're going to set up a timer. So timer is the name of our class, and I'm going to call this one start timer. And there we go. So I've set it up, and that's the name of my variable. I might put a capital T in there just to see the difference. Alright, so we're going to use that. So we're going to go start timer, and we've got to set it up first. So in the setup, we're going to create it, we're going to initialize it, and we're going to make it equals a new timer. This is where we put that temporary variable in. What do we want to start it at? Let's start our timer at 10 seconds. And there we go. So that is our constructor that we're using right there. This one here, we created our constructor with our set time. That's what we're setting it to. Now, down in our drawer, make sure we don't put it above draw background. We want it below drawing the background. So we always have draw, opening bracket, background. Now, under here, we're going to, let's start by doing our timer. Start timer. And we're going to update it so it counts up. So we're going to count up, because that was the name of our function for counting up. There we go. So what that's going to do is going to count up. And we need to be able to see our timer to prove that this is working. So text, and we're going to put our start timer. And this is where we need to get our time. We need to know what our time is. So we're going to go get time. That was our function. And then we need to give it a position for text. And we're going to put it at 20 up in the top left hand corner of our screen. Just so we can see it, we're going to go fill and just make that to 0. So that's going to be black so we can see our text if I put a 0 in there. Excellent. Alright, so let's run this and see what happens. Here is our board. Up in the top right hand corner we have a timer, and as you can see it's going up because we set our timer to update as count up, and as you can see it continuously goes up. Now what happens if I change that to count down? So let's go down and hit play on it. It's going to start counting down. There we go, and it'll keep going. It'll go past 0 and it'll go into the negatives. Excellent. Alright, so that's working. So now I'm going to show you the one thing I told you do not do, and we're going to go start timer dot count up. So we've now got it counting down and counting up at the same time. Guess what's going to happen? Our timer doesn't change because it's adding and subtracting the same amount, so it never changes, so it never moves. So now we have a counter that can count up or down. Let's leave it counting up. And that is it for this tutorial. So there's your timer class. You've got all your functions in here to create timers. You can create multiple timers now. You just got to make sure you initialize them and make sure you update them. Alright, in the next tutorial we're going to look at how to create a buttoned class.